Hey y'all, it's Arwen, the professional joy seeker, and I'm here to talk about a tarot deck. And even better, I'm here to talk with Laura Perry, who created the Minoan Tarot. Now, I want you to know that the Minoan Tarot is a very different tarot deck. If you want something that's typical, this isn't it. This is a beautiful deck with a really creative interpretation. I've done readings with it already. If you watch my tarot scopes, you know I've already launched this deck out there, and I am in love with it. It's a wonderful deck. Laura, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
Now, for people who don't know you, what are the three top things they should know about you?
I'm mildly obsessed with the Minoans and their culture and spirituality. Um, I've been in tarot for, I guess, about 25 years seriously. Um, and a third thing, heavens, I don't know. I can consider my spirituality to be generally pagan, not specifically Minoan, but that's the Minoan stuff is dear to my heart, and it's really what drives my passion.
And if people want to find out more about Laura, more about what you do, I know that they can follow you on Facebook. You've got an Instagram where you post some fabulous. I just saw your Minoan altar that you said you made out of scented clay. Am I correct?
Oh, the finger labyrinth. Yeah, that's spice clay.
Yeah, that looked very cool. I wish we had smellogram.
Yeah,
But
I'm one of the artsy craftsy types, so I do stuff. I like to make things with my hands.
very good. Now, two important questions. One, dog or cat?
Both.
Good answer. And
I grew up on a farm. If it's an animal, I like it.
coffee or tea?
Um, Tea for the caffeine. I like decaf coffee in the evening after supper. I know.
Oh, we can't be friends anymore. But no, I'm a coffee and tea girl too. It just depends on my mood. But man, I love coffee with sweet cream.
Oh,
See,
yeah.
I'm a little tiny girl because of it. So let's dive in and talk about ancient Minoans meet modern tarot. And this is the back of this deck. The Schiffer publications do such a marvelous job. And the border on this, I'm in love with the border. But tell me about what made you want to do a deck on Minoan tarot. Did the Minoans even have tarot?
No. Tarot doesn't show up until Renaissance Italy, so it definitely does not go back. The Minoans, they're like the third and second millennia BCE, so definitely there was no tarot back then. Um, I've been fooling around with tarot for a long time, and I have the world's messiest desk, and so I almost always have books open from whatever kind of research I'm doing. And I was doing a tarot layout one day on top of the multiple sedimentary layers. And I happened, while I was in the middle of the layout, I happened to just look across one of the piles, and there was one of my Minoan books open. And it was open to the Prince of the Lilies fresco, which is, I'll find him for you real quick here in the book, because he's the high priest in the tarot deck. And I looked at that fresco and I said, holy cow, that looks like a tarot card. And I was just naive enough to have no clue what it takes to create an entire flippin' tarot deck and companion book. And so, like the crazy little person I was, I said, ooh, that's cool. I'll make a deck. Actually, that's not entirely true. The first thing I said was, I bet there's one out there that I could buy.
Ah.
That's actually the first thing I said. And that was also naive, I'm afraid, because Minoan stuff is just not the top popular. There's Celtic stuff everywhere and angel stuff everywhere, but not a whole lot of Minoan. And so this was four and a half, almost 5 years ago. I went scouring the internet and found no Minoan tarot. I found a tiny little mention of Ellen Lorenzi Prince's beautiful Minoan tarot deck that she had only just begun at that time. Apparently she only had done the majors.
Yeah.
And it was not for sale. She had her own copy of it that she was using in workshops, and that was all I could find anywhere. And I thought, well, drat. And then I went on to the insanity of saying, oh, well, I could make one. You know, I'm an artist kind of person. And so, yeah, that was pretty much it, because it's what I wanted. That seems to be my MO. I go looking for something that I want, and if I can't find it, I make it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually have a copy of Ellen's deck. I've met Ellen in person, and she is one of the sweetest, nicest people ever. And I know that you and she talked about the fact that you had like multiple Minoan, because y'all came out very close to one another, didn't you?
Yeah. I think she may have started hers before I actually started mine, but she used a slightly different art method, so hers came out sooner. And she was really sweet. I was also naive and crazy enough to actually put my whole artistic process up in public on Facebook. So as I did the cards one at a time, I posted them and let people comment on them. And I even let my Facebook followers pick the background color for the cards.
Nice.
And so I was, I guess, most of the way through creating the artwork when she was ready to publish her deck, and she contacted me and she said, I don't want you to panic. There's going to be another Minoan tarot deck out there. And so I had a look at hers, and it's beautiful, but I was already most of the way through mine, and I figured, okay, I've already blown, all these hours. I should finish this project. And the two decks are very different.
Yes.
They're different ways of looking at the Minoan symbology and iconography, and I think they both work. So people who like Minoan stuff would probably like both of them.
The only other deck that I can think of that has even a hint of Minoan artwork in it is Elizabeth Hazel's The Whispering Tarot, and a couple of her cards have Minoan iconography, but it's a very varied deck. It's not all Minoan.
Right.
She's got some different things in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I might do a side by side on the two Minoans, because I love them both.
Yeah.
And I think people really would do well if you love the Minoan culture. You want to get both. But now let's talk about something that's a little bizarre about yours, and is going to throw a lot of tarot readers into a tizzy. I'm just going to say.
Okay.
You messed with the court cards.
Yes, I did, but I have historical precedent.
So tell us about that.
My process for creating this deck was to think, okay, we know there was no tarot in ancient Crete, but if there had been, how would a Minoan artist have depicted these ideas using the art style, the colors, and the iconography of their time? Okay, so if I were a Minoan artist, how would I depict the idea behind the high priest, the idea behind the suit of fire or air? How would I depict those using Minoan images? And so I got to the court cards, and I love tarot. I've done it, for years. I'm used to king, queen, knight, and page. That seemed perfectly normal until I started thinking about how a Minoan artist would do tarot. And ancient Crete was an egalitarian society. It was pretty unusual for the time. And women and men were fairly equal. And I looked at the court cards and I thought, they're unbalanced. Gender-wise, they're unbalanced. There's king above queen and two male court cards. And I know some decks will take, say, the page and have that be a female. And so that's a certain kind of balance, but still you have the male above the female and then the male above the female. And that didn't feel right. And I thought, okay, what am I going to do? Because I wanted to stick with what I consider to be real tarot. This isn't an oracle deck.
Right.
It follows the structure of a conventional tarot deck. And so I started digging through the Renaissance Italian decks, and I came up with the Carrie Yale copy of the Visconti Tarocchi, which has 6, not 4 court cards. Well, it just blew my mind because it's 3 male-female pairs, and the male and female pairs are equal, right? And so that's the thing. That was exactly what I was looking for. And it's a real tarot deck, so I didn't make it up out of thin air.
No, not at all.
And so I needed to figure out how that was going to work in terms of the Minoans, because the Minoans didn't have kings and queens, in spite of what Sir Arthur Evans desperately wanted to believe. And so what did they have? Who was at the top of their hierarchy? And the priesthood pretty much ran society there, just like they did in Mesopotamia. And so I've got the priest and priestess as the top pair. And then the Lord and Lady, which are some sort of fancy fake medieval names for the wealthy merchant class, what we would consider to be the middle class. Mm-hmm. And then there's the youth and maid, which are the young ones, the immature but energetic and eager. So those are the and you're busily sorting cards. I can see that.
I am. I'm looking for them while you're talking. I can't find my Lord of Horns, and he's hiding from me.
Uh-oh.
So
mine are all. I actually use these, so mine are all out of order.
And mine are. Oh, you know why I can't find him? I'll bet he's still in the box.
Oh.
And look, the first card I pulled up.
How about that?
Y'all, what she's talking about, I'm going to show you the pairs. I'm going to show you first the priest and priestess of Labrys's, and we're going to talk about the suits also. So there you go. That's one pair of court cards. And then she has the Lord and Lady, and I'm going to show you from Horns. And then the last pair, and I'm going to show you from Daggers. I've got the Rhytons, I believe is how do you say that?
Rhytons, yeah.
Rhytons, okay. And here is from Daggers, the maid and the youth and maid. And just so you see the fourth suit, we'll get, I think I put, priest and priestess. Now, I love, when I first saw this, I have to admit, I was like, oh, that's going to be really hard for me as a reader. It wasn't. I opened the deck and cold read when I did my tarot scopes. I had not done anything other than with the cards and kind of flipped through them and looked at how pretty they were and then shuffled them. So that was a completely, I've never worked with this deck, which is, I like to do that with a new deck. But and a lot of the courts showed up, and I was like, you little rascals. But I didn't have any trouble with it. I really liked that we had the gender split for this. And I'll tell y'all that one of my favorite authors in the world, one of the authors that I can remember binge reading as a kid, and I'm talking a kid, I was maybe 10, 11 when I got into her books, which is a little young for her stuff, but Mary Renault.
Yes. The King Must Die.
Right.
And did she write The Bull from the Sea too?
I think so. That's the one about the bull riders, right? They're both about.
Right.
Yeah. And her books, y'all, first thing you need to know about that author that I did not know, she was a lesbian. She was actually fairly out and fairly known.
Yeah.
As a woman interested person. She and her partner moved to Europe. But she is an amazing author. Now, did you have was she one of your authors that you read as a young child? Who kind of got you interested in the Minoan culture?
Well, you can blame my 9th grade art history teacher for that one, to be quite honest. We had this enormous book. It must have been, that thick. It was like an unabridged dictionary. Our art history class, and it had these chunks of color plates in it. And he believed in starting at the beginning, so we started with Paleolithic cave art and worked our way forward. Which is great because most history classes ignore the Minoans and start with the Hellenic Greeks. So it's like the Minoans didn't even exist. So we were flipping through the color plates in class one day, and I flipped a page, and there was the Bull Leaper fresco. And I got goosebumps, and something went click. And this was before the days of the internet. So I was scouring for every tiny short paragraph in every encyclopedia and history book in the library,
Yeah.
for years before I found more information. It wasn't really until, I guess, the 90s that there was sort of a new archaeological boom in terms of Minoan research. And then there was a lot more information available. But yeah, it wasn't the historical fiction so much as the art that it was frighteningly familiar. And yeah, every time I saw more and more of it, I was drawn more and more to that culture.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things I was aiming for with this deck. I wanted people who use the deck to pick up a card and look at it and feel like they're looking at a wall in a building in ancient Crete.
And I think you nailed that. I really do, because when I look at this, and I was telling Laura earlier, but some people would think this is a slam. She didn't. She understood what I meant. The cards are beautifully flat. They're beautifully much like you're walking up to a wall. I mean, here's strength, y'all. Right?
Yeah.
Boom. Right there. You're at a wall. You've got the framework going on. And I love this touch at the bottom. I don't know if you did that or your designers did that, but I love that.
The designer kind of fell in love with the borders, I think, and wanted to put more and more and more of the borders everywhere. And the border on the strength card and all the major arcana cards is actually the border that's on the Bull Leaper fresco.
Oh.
So that's where that comes from. Everything in these cards comes in one way or another from actual Minoan art, including the color palette. So even though you've got the sort of traditional colors for the 4 suits, so you've got blue for water and yellow for air and red for fire and green for earth, those are tones of those colors that we actually find in the Minoan frescoes. So the entire color palette specifically sticks with what the ancient Minoan artists had.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want to talk about ancient Minoans and tarot. You've already said that this didn't exist in Minoan culture. So you kind of went in and you had to translate what we might consider traditional tarot imagery. But we've got 3 different sets of tarot imagery out there. We've got the Marseille type, we've got Rider-Waite, we've got the Thoth deck. How did you translate that? That had to have been difficult because you can't really, I mean, what am I thinking of? The devil. The devil didn't really exist.
Right, that's a Judeo-Christian concept. So
right, and so I was trying to look him up, and I think I went past him. But it's a Minotaur?
Yeah, it's the Minotaur.
Okay. I thought I pulled him out. Oh, I did. So here's your devil. Sorry. Talk to us about how you, as a traditional reader, because you read traditionally, how do you take our modern view of tarot and apply it to an ancient palette?
I think that process taught me tarot better than anything that I have done in the decades that I have been using it. Because what I had to do was I had to think, okay, not how is this card usually drawn, but what does it really mean? And then taking what it means, how would a Minoan artist depict that using the things from their culture, the symbols and the images and the colors? So it's like I had to strip tarot down to the bare bones, build it back up again, Minoan art.
And when I look at the devil, you've got a lot of, we've got horns. And here's interesting. He's holding the golden thread this time. So, and in the myth that most of us are, or the story that most of us are familiar with, Ariadne gives Perseus, I'm trying to make sure I got the names right.
Theseus.
Yeah. I'm all right, the sandal guy. But she gives Theseus the thread so he can go in and come back out. So
Right.
here, the devil holds the thread, and I get the, when I look at this card, I get the idea of the devil saying, are you going to let me hold the thread, or are you not going to let me hold the thread? Who's in control here?
Well, and part of it too is that a lot of the myths that we have about the Minoan gods and goddesses are what you might call mudslinging PR by the later Greeks. Yeah, oh yeah. A friend of mine suggested that it's similar to the way the Romans talked about the Druids. Okay, so what you have is a later culture, a conquering culture trying to make the original culture look bad so they look. And Theseus as a character didn't actually exist in Minoan times. The Hellenic Greeks came along a solid 1,000 years after Minoan civilization fell. And so to them, the Minoans were this sort of ancient glorified golden age. But the Greeks wanted to be the golden age. I mean, we all want to be the golden age, right? That's how it works.
Yeah.
And so they created Theseus, who was their culture hero, right? He's from Athens. He goes and he goes to Crete, where the Minotaur, who was actually a god, a shamanic underworld god in ancient Crete,
Oh, wow.
yes, essentially a monster, the devil, right? And where Ariadne is just a girl with a ball of string. Well, Ariadne is a goddess, okay? She was a major player in the Minoan pantheon. And so the Greeks seriously demoted all of the Minoan mythological characters and demonized them. But originally, Minotaur was a bull god who attachment to the underworld, and Ariadne and her labyrinth, which was not some kind of maze that people went into to get killed. The labyrinth is actually a symbol for the underworld journey or the journey to your own inner self. And that would have been done in ancient Crete, guided by the priesthood who had a clue, presumably. And so the idea of the Minotaur standing there with the ball of string is, that's not his ball of string, that's not Ariadne's ball of string, that's yours. That's your path. And you're the only one who can find the way into the center of the labyrinth where all that darkness lies. You're the only one who can deal with your own darkness. And then the interesting thing about the labyrinth is it's not a maze that you can get lost in. It's called a unicursal maze. That means one path. So even though it spirals and twists back and forth, there's only one way in, and it's the same way back out. And so it's almost like death and rebirth. It's a traveling to your inner self and dealing with what's there and incorporating it and acknowledging it. Because the Minotaur is not evil. He's just dark and scary.
Beautiful.
And then rebirthing yourself, I guess you could say, coming back out of that cave.
I love that. One of the decks that I used to read with, one of my primary, I'm a serial monogamist when it comes to tarot. And one of my first professional decks was Tarot of the Old Path. And if I'm not mistaken, death is actually called rebirth in that deck, I think. But and it's a beautiful card. Now I want to ask you, because in some of these, like we've been talking about, what we consider traditional symbolism doesn't happen. So here's death. I think death is wonderful, and death and star are the two cards I look at in any deck. If I don't resonate with those two cards, the deck may be lovely, wonderful, whatever. It's not going to be a deck I can read with. It's just kind of how I've set my blocks up in my head. But look at this death card, y'all. Talk to us about this. What are the flowers we see here? What are the symbols?
Okay, so this is a tomb. This is a sort of artistic rendering of an actual tomb from Minoan Crete. And The coffin part of it, the kist, is shaped like a labrys, which you also see sitting up there on the shrine shelf at the head of the coffin. And the labrys and those flowers, which are lilies, and the rhyton, which is a pitcher that's used to pour offerings, are all symbols of the goddess, ancient Crete, and they're all symbols of the rebirth card as well as the death card. The labrys is a multifaceted symbol. It looks like a butterfly, which is an ancient symbol for the human soul, which is completely appropriate for death and rebirth. It is also female symbolic because, especially when it has the holder in the middle for the staff, it looks very much like a vulva. And you can see it on the back of the cards, all the cards.
Yeah. There you go, guys.
Yeah. And it also, most people don't know this, the kind of tool that the Minoans used to till their fields, it was called a hoe axe, looked like that. So you also get the agricultural cycle of growth, harvest, and fallow time and rebirth.
Very nice. Now, for myself, the labrys, I actually have in my jewelry box a little tiny labrys, because when I came out as a lesbian back in the early 80s, like 80, 81, about the time I started reading tarot, actually, the labrys was a very popular symbol for lesbians at that time. I don't know if it still is. I'm not in that culture. Oops. Death just jumped off. But so I don't know if anybody out there who is lesbian can tell me if we're still using that. I just don't know. I now identify as bisexual, and I'm actually married to a man. But it's a neat symbol, and so because of that, there was a lot of interest in labryses at that time. Did you run across any of that kind of information?
Yeah, and there are a couple of groups, I guess you would call them feminist or goddess spirituality groups, that still use the labrys as a fairly major symbol. I think it goes back to the idea that women were equals with men in Minoan Crete, and so there was none of the commodification. You weren't somebody's property.
Yeah.
So, excuse me. That I think that says a lot about the differences, between cultures. And I can definitely see how it's a powerful symbol for a lot of women.
Now, I want to ask you, you kind of renamed a couple of cards, and the one that I'm like Minotaur instead of Devil. This one is an interesting rename. Can you talk to me a little bit about Sacrifice, card 12?
Yeah, a lot of these, I will admit to a mild amount of craziness here. A lot of these, I designed the card, and I walked away from my desk, and I went about my life, and I went to bed that night, and I had a dream in which someone came to me and said, "You did that one wrong." And so I would come back the next day and redo it. Okay, so that's the Hanged Man.
Yeah.
And in conventional tarot, the Hanged Man frequently has something to do with Hermes, right? So you've got the Hanged Man in the legs crossed in the position that gives you the Hermes symbol. And Hermes didn't exist yet in Minoan Crete. He's a later Hellenic Greek dude, and I really like him, but he wasn't around. And I thought, okay, how am I going to do this? What is the Hanged Man about? And so I started looking at connections between different cards. And I've got a bunch of that actually written out in the companion book, how you can compare. So Sacrifice is one of the control cards. So you've got Strength, where you get what you need by controlling yourself. The Chariot, where you get what you need by controlling something outside of you, like the creatures that are pulling the chariot. And you've got sacrifice, where you get what you need by giving up control.
Yes.
And so that was, and so I looked at the hangman from that point of view. Didn't have the word sacrifice yet. I was just still looking at the hanged man as you succeed, you get what you need by letting go, by giving up control.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh, well, that's what sacrifice is. That is exactly what sacrifice is. And the imagery on that is from an archaeological find called the Hagia Triada sarcophagus,
Wow.
which is a coffin that has some absolutely stunning paintings on the sides of it. And one side shows the guy's funeral, and the other side shows his rebirth into the other world, into the afterlife. And the image on the sacrifice card is part of the sacrifice from his funeral. It's actually the Minoans, as beautiful and egalitarian a society as they were, they practiced animal sacrifice just like everybody back then did. And what that amounted to was, instead of the butcher offing the cow, they actually brought it in and slaughtered it and prepared it as part of the funeral feast. And so that's what that is. And I kind of like the imagery of, I identify with the cow. You see what I mean? You're helpless and bound on the table, ready to be slaughtered and given up as the sacrifice. And that's what you do. That's what the hanged man is. That's saying to the universe, I give.
Yeah, when I do readings and when the hangman shows up for my clients, I remind them that in this card for me, the hanged man sacrifice, however we name it, represents two very important to me mythological figures. Now, word of warning, y'all, I call every religion a mythology when I'm doing my work professionally, so
Right.
that it's egalitarian. But Christ on the cross was a sacrifice,
Yep.
and Odin on the tree of Yggdrasil was a sacrifice. So sacrifice, and people think animal sacrifice, evil, evil, evil. We as a people have evolved into a different way of thinking about animals. I don't think that animal sacrifice, because for a sacrifice to be valid or good, if you will,
Right.
the animal must be precious. There must be something. Otherwise, God would not have asked. Who did he asked somebody to sacrifice his own son?
Asked Isaac to sacrifice Jacob, right?
Thank you. I could not bring up the name. So they weren't saying, go just pick some animal out of your farm. They wanted you to pick the nicest, the best, the fatted calf.
Yes, the perfect one with no blemish, right? The one that you really don't want to give up, or else it's not a sacrifice.
Right. So when y'all are looking at cards like this and you think, oh, animal sacrifice, redirect your brain, question your thoughts, and say, well, what is it that I'm going to sacrifice here? Because when you sacrifice something, just like Laura just said, it's got to mean something. It's got to be hard. Lent is a type of sacrifice.
Right.
You don't give up vegetables for Lent. You give up chocolate. You give up. My sister gave up pleasure reading once, and she said that was the hardest thing for her.
Oh, wow.
So now let's look at one other, and then I want to look at some of the. I've got some of the suits pulled out. Here's another one you sort of renamed. This one makes sense to me, but let's talk about this one.
Okay, so that's temperance. Okay. And that's from the Bully per fresco. Most people will recognize that. I think the Bully per fresco is the most well-known piece of Minoan art, which is probably why it was in my art book all those years ago. Okay, and so I thought temperance, the concept behind temperance is a fairly modern one, right? Because in ancient societies, there were no Calvinist puritanical ideas about drinking and dancing and sex and things like that. And so what the idea behind it? And so I started sort of leaning into things like moderation, and then ultimately I got to finding the balance, because that's what temperance is. Temperance isn't about total asceticism, finding that golden mean, as Aristotle put it. It's about finding the right balance between things so that you don't give up all pleasure, but so that you have health and also satisfaction. And there are so many aspects of life that are unbalanced now.
Yeah.
In our 90 mile an hour distracted modern world. And so I thought, what on earth from ancient Crete could represent that? Because it was, like all ancient societies, it moved at a different pace than we do. And so how could I represent that using their iconography? And then I remembered the bully per fresco, because these were people who, now granted, the bulls were probably tame and trained, and this was probably something akin to a circus act. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't incredibly dangerous still. And so these were highly skilled athletes who would have a bull prodding at them, and they would leap and grab the bull's horns and somersault over its back and then off again onto the ground behind it. Oh my God, I grew up on a farm, okay? And I'm familiar with cattle, and I still wouldn't even try that, no matter how well trained I was. And so there's the part of the fresco where there's the athlete in that split second where he's balanced on the back of a charging bull. And that's what life is, right? Life is finding that split second moment of balance while it's all still running at full speed.
Beautiful.
And that's what that card is.
And
because it is possible,
I also see it as the balance of our wild and tame side, because you have to, as a bull, the bull has
Right.
to be going, and the human
Yes.
side has to be focused, connected movement. So I
Right.
really love your translation there for Temperance. I thought that was one of my fave cards in the whole deck.
Oh, thank you. Wow.
Now let's look at, oh, and everybody, since I said I have to see Death and the Star, here's the star. And it is a very, very, to me, traditional imagery for the star. You have a woman, you have water.
Yep.
So was this an easy card, or did you get told this one was wrong and have to come back to it?
Oh, the star? I've had complaints about it. Where's the star?
What?
Excuse me? Because there's no actual star drawn on the picture.
Oh, for
You missed
God's
that,
sakes,
didn't you?
people, get a pen and add it. Yeah, I didn't. It didn't even occur to me, because the star is such an important card to me. This is one of the cards that I need certain pieces, and the pouring is it. And her hair for me, I don't know if y'all notice this, but her hair for me serves as on one surface and another surface. I don't know if that was intentional, Laura, but that's where I got my star imagery from.
Yeah, and that is actually taken after a fresco from Tyrants, and the represents, to me, most people don't know that the goddess Pandora actually goes back to Minoan Crete, and she wasn't a bad guy. She was originally Pandora was originally one of the names of the mother goddess Rhea, and Pandora literally means all giver, and so it was her vase, her version of the cauldron of all things. So it wasn't all the bad things with just hope at the bottom. This is the great mother pouring out everything on the earth.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what the star is,
Well, I'm really surprised. I mean, I can understand why some people would look at some of this and go, "Where's my symbology?" But I'm actually shocked that the star is one of those, because that's one of the cards that I just went, "Oh, I didn't even see the bottom." I just went, "Oh, star," and then moved my thumb, and yeah, that's my
Yeah.
card. So now I want to look at the suits,
Okay.
and remind me, Labrys's are your air suit, right?
Yes.
Okay. So
Even though it's a blade, the Labrys is a stylized butterfly.
yeah, and I use swords as air anyway, so that works for me. But
Yeah.
let's look at her Labrys. This is the 10 of Labrys. Now, if you're a traditional reader and you think of 10 of swords for this, 10 of air, yeah, that kind of works, right? You've got
Yeah.
too much going on.
One of my first tarot teachers suggested that I come up with a single keyword for each card as I was learning them.
Mm-hmm.
And the Ten of Swords, I picked the word overkill.
Yeah.
And there you have it.
Yeah, perfect. Now let's look at the for me the fire, and this is daggers. Now some people say, what aren't daggers swords? Maybe, but with swords, here's why I would make a difference for air and fire on swords and daggers. Swords are long reach. You have to reach out, they're not close. Daggers, that's passion, people. That's right there in your face kind of activity.
Yeah.
Now here is again a 10. I don't know why I picked 10 on both of them, but I did. So this would be your 10 of wands, your 10 of daggers. Talk to
10
us
of
about.
trying to do way too damn much. Pardon my English.
No, right. That's exactly what I looked at. I'm like, somebody's getting cut, and it is not the person you want to cut. This is self-inflicted because you're doing too much. And I love the reds. I love the color of the red. I know you talked about the Oh, Bentley, you weren't supposed to open. Do not jump on the. Sorry. As
I
suddenly
shut
the
my door
interview
to keep
ends.
mine out.
I had the door shut, and he decided that he would open it. But the palette. I know you talked about the palette of your colors. It's not that scarlet red. It's a real dull red. Is that a Minoan color palette you were talking about?
Yes. In fact, that's the background color on that Prince of the Lilies
Yeah.
fresco. That is, it's actually red ochre. From going back to Stone Age times, representing the mother's blood and all that kind of. The Minoans used obviously all natural pigments. The only one that's man-made is that sort of deep Aegean blue. It's called Egyptian blue, and the Egyptians actually had a secret recipe for it, and they sold it far and wide for a high price.
Those silly Egyptians.
Yeah.
And here's what we're talking about with the Egyptian blue. Look, okay, y'all, I did not intentionally pull tens. I just want to say that
Sure.
the last one is not a 10. I just had to double check. But now this is the card for me of happily ever after, and we've got 10 full pictures. Talk to me about is this a representation of something that we should understand?
That is a garland. Garlands are shown and it's got it's a string of some kind of decorative cord, and those are lilies hanging from it.
Okay.
And this type of garland is shown in celebratory situations in Minoan art. So like when there's a big parade or some kind of big success, they draped garlands all over everything. And so that's, it's like our version of crepe paper streamers, I guess.
Huh.
So it's like, yay, celebrate, happy, we did it.
And what is this? The writing.
Oh, okay. That is Linear B. A terribly, terribly unimaginative name. So when they started digging up all of this amazing stuff on Crete from Minoan times, they discovered some clay tablets that had two different scripts, two different closely related scripts written on them. And the only reason we even have the clay tablets is that some horribly unpleasant people, probably the Mycenaeans, actually looted and burned all the Minoan cities. Yeah, it wasn't pretty. These the tablets were like notepads, right? So they were raw clay, and people would write on them. And what they wrote was what the stuff that the temples were receiving as offerings and taxes and stuff. And they would write it all down, and then when they were done, they would smudge over the clay and start again. So it was like a notepad. But when the temples burned down, these tablets were unintentionally fired. So yeah, how about that? And so we have them now. And the Minoans probably also wrote on papyrus, but for obvious reasons, there ain't any more of that.
Right.
And so we have two scripts. We have Linear A, which Minoans wrote their own language in, which we have no idea what it was, and it still isn't translated in spite of dozens of people saying, oh, I know what it says. No, we don't, because there simply isn't enough of it to do a proper decipherment. Now, the stuff that's on the cards is linear B. The Mycenaeans, actually, for the last several centuries of Minoan times, the Minoans and the Mycenaeans and interacted. The Minoans taught the Mycenaeans all kinds of things, including how to write. So the Mycenaeans looked at the Minoan script and said, can you make one of those for us, please? And so linear B is essentially an adaptation of the Minoan script for the Mycenaean Greek language. And I used that on the cards because we know what it says.
Ah.
Okay? I didn't want to just stick symbols. You know, it's like people who get a tattoo in some Asian language and they don't know that it says chicken noodle soup. I just thought that was not appropriate, you know.
You're much kinder than me, because I actually have read a story about somebody who got one and they were ugly to the tattoo artist, and so they got the kanji for drunken whore.
Oh dear.
Be nice to the person putting a needle in permanent ink in your skin, people.
Yeah. And
so what does the word say?
Okay, well, I have to look up each one, to be quite honest, because I am not adept at it. 10 of Rhytons. And these are all in the book, by the way, this gorgeous companion book that the fabulous people at Schiffer.
And while she's looking that up, I'm going to show y'all full color pictures, glossy pages.
I am so astounded at the job they did. I had no idea that the book was going to be so beautiful. I really didn't.
Yeah, this is a keeper book, y'all. This is one you want to put on your shelf and hang on to. And it's even, I don't know if you can see right up here, it's color coded, so yes. You can flip to the right section. So you can go to 2 of Rhyton, 6, 8, 9, 10. Wait, I just skipped right past the 10.
This says the linear B symbols on that card spell out the name of an ancient fertility festival. So that would be a celebratory sort of thing. What I did was I picked a word or phrase for each card that had something to do with the meaning of the card itself.
Yeah.
Because the Minoans were a literate culture, it seemed appropriate to have something like that on there.
Absolutely. Now, when I look at the last card, which is a horn card, the word I get is cooperation. What was your key word for 3 of Horns?
That's it.
Okay. So
that's it.
So this is the deck really good for people who can tap into their intuitive sides. And I am going to say that I do think you need to have either a strong knowledge of tarot or no knowledge of tarot. This would be a really good deck for somebody who has no knowledge of tarot and wants to learn it, because the book, y'all, it doesn't enforce any meanings. It gives you good suggestions, and there's room to wiggle. There's room for your own intuitive self to come in. And I think that's hard. I've gotten hold of beautiful decks and they've got like dogmatic text.
Oh, wow.
So congratulations on making a deck that really works for me as an intuitive reader. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you. I tend to read pretty intuitively myself. I was a very clumsy tarot reader for years. I learned on the Rider-Waite-Smith the way so many people do. And I showed up at a party one day and that a friend of mine was giving, and it was a New Year's party, and she said, I'm sorry, I forgot to give you your Christmas present. And I said, were we supposed to get each other Christmas presents? And she had a deck. It was actually the Sacred Circle Tarot, which is one of my favorites.
That's a beautiful deck.
It is. It is.
Is that Anna Franklin?
Yes.
Yeah.
And she handed me the deck, and she said, have a look at it. And it was in actually it was a hand-me-down, so it was in a fabric bag already. And I looked at it and I said, wow. She said, do you like it? And I said, yeah, it's gorgeous. Thank you. And she said, great. You're going to do readings for everyone here now. And she immediately called everyone over and said, here, Laura's going to sit over here and do readings. Line up, everybody.
Awesome.
And so it was definitely being thrown into the deep end, and I had no chance at all to go look in the book and look up what any of the stuff meant. And so, yeah, that was my baptism by fire into intuitive reading. And that was the night that tarot suddenly really deeply clicked for me. So,
yeah, I totally get that, and that's how I teach tarot. I teach people, put the book aside for now. You can come back to the book.
Right,
The
right,
books are written for a reason. Authors have put their heart and soul. I'm an author. For me to
right.
say, put the book aside, but let the images tell you the story. Then pick the book up and sync your vision up with what the book says, and you're going to find a richer meaning, I think, for the card.
Yeah.
Laura, I want to thank you for joining me. Before we go, I'd like to ask you one more thing,
Okay.
and that is if you had one thing to say to somebody who is sitting out there going, I would like to make a deck about this thing. What How should they go about it? What's the best way to start?
Um, the best way to start is to not think about how big the project is. But no, seriously, if I had had a clue when I started, I wouldn't have started. Um, if it's something you feel compelled to do, if it's something coming from your heart, then it's something you should do, and it doesn't matter how big the project is. Um, what is it they say? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
One of my favorite quotes.
So yeah, do it. There, there will never be enough tarot decks to express all the different ways there are of thinking about tarot. And
Thank you
if
for
you
saying
have
that.
and if you have your own vision of how to do it, then do it. You know, it will only add to what's already out there.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Because if people said, oh, that's already been done, well, we wouldn't have two wonderfully beautiful Minoan tarots. We'd only have one tarot about animals. We wouldn't have the many tarot decks that we have. So I think that's super important, guys. And I hope you'll take that to heart and get out there and create. So, Laura, thank you for joining me. I always tell people, seek joy, y'all, as I say goodbye. What do you say to people?
Um, I say peace be with you.
Beautiful, beautiful. And peace be with you too. So, guys, thank you very much. I hope you'll stick around and subscribe to the channel. I'm going to link Laura in the drop down so you can follow her. You can stalk her all over the internet. And I forgot. How long she's giving away a deck. Now, I don't know the details.
Oh, this is you have until midnight Valentine's Day.
Ooh, so I will
So
get this up soon.
yeah, I'm giving away 2 decks, and it's right there on the Minoan Tarot website, minoantarot.com. I'm giving away 2 decks. I will ship them anywhere in the world. All you have to do is sign up for my monthly newsletter. So get in while you can. It's through the 14th.
That's excellent. And I'm going to, because of that, I'm going to get this uploaded today. I have a
Oh,
review video that went this morning, actually on another Schiffer deck. It was on the Herbal Healing Oracle. But I'll get this one up too so that people have time because, gosh, that's just a few days away. And
yeah.
when y'all need to get signed up for her newsletter, it's an excellent newsletter. I actually just joined it, so I'm kind of lying when I say I've read it.
Yeah.
But I know it's going to be excellent because she's a good writer and she's an artist. So what's not to love?
Oh,
So
thank you.
seek joy, y'all. Bye bye.